This is the JWN podcast. My guest today is just a complete package of creativity and somebody who really has taken the independent spirit of independent music and really applied it to his career. He's the founder of Coast Records. He's a recording engineer. He's also a drummer and musician and songwriter. He plays drums in the band Human Resources. He does the sound for clubs like the Royal American. He also runs his own recording studio. The guy pretty much does it all. I know you're going to enjoy this conversation, so here it is, my conversation with Matt Zutell. As we were discussing as you walked in, the reason why I brought you on here is because, I kind of knew you from the Royal American, from doing sound there. And I know I talked to John Kenny, who's one of the owners there. And, he sings your praises. He's like, I got the best sound guy in South Carolina. I was like, it sounds amazing in there. So definitely. And of course, you play drums in Human Resources. I do, yeah. As you probably, and you play, I've seen you on stage with other bands from time to time.
Yeah,
I imagine.
I'll fill in here and there. Different groups if need be.
I imagine at this point, you know all of their music from either recording sessions or from just, doing their sound.
It does end up happening that way a lot. I'll record a band's album, and if they end up needing a drummer to play live, I feel like by default end up being asked or getting involved playing drums because I either maybe played on the recordings or worked on the album with them, so I'm familiar with the music and the record, and that kind of just naturally progresses into like if they need a live drummer, if I can do it, I'll do it.
That's awesome. But here's the thing about drummers, sons of bitches. It's like the most important member of any rock and roll band, right?
I'd agree.
No, it really is. It really is. And they're also the hardest to kind of, contain to one project,
Sure, yeah.
So when you're young and you're playing in a band and if you lose your drummer for whatever reason it may be, you're like in trouble. You can find someone to replace them, but then you're like, you know what I'm saying? Then they're going to go away. Like it was Spinal Tap caught it for a reason. Every rock and roll musician loves that movie because the depiction of the drummer is so accurate, not in the fact that they're going to just blow up, but they just come and go for a lot of people.
For sure. Yeah.
And the more drummers I talk to, the more I see it's because they tend to be like the most, logical. You know what I'm saying? They're the most so you have this Swiss Army knife toolkit of things that you're good at, right? So you're not like, you don't put all your eggs in one basket. You're not like a singer-songwriter who's like, everything is into like, I'm playing guitar and singing and that's it. And that's my life. It's like, no, you could go become, a business manager at some company tomorrow if you needed to be.
Yeah.
You could, you could be a recording engineer. You could also be a songwriter. You can fill in on drums for any band. You're completely covered.
It has been nice, especially like with the current state of things right now, like so many bands or, people I know whose tours got canceled and they're unable to play. It's like so unfortunate that their whole worlds have just like come crumbling down. And it's like when stuff like that goes out the window, I feel very fortunate to have something where I've been able to sort of adapt to what's going on. Like early on, my studio really slowed down. Like a lot of the projects that I had booked were, postponed indefinitely until people were more comfortable or things got better. But in like all my live shows of doing sound at Royal and even playing live got canceled. But I was able to sort of navigate into doing like live streaming and learning that side of things. And I've been working with a group of guys that have a streaming company in town, and they're booking agents that they have gone from booking shows to booking live streams with their bands. And so that's been a really cool way to kind of stay busy and continue to do some semblance of like a live sound situation. So it's been cool to have different things to sort of have as options to go into,
I feel like certain aspects of that things that had existed before but were never fully utilized.
Right. Yeah.
In the streaming realm and in just the broadcast in general. The fact that we're sitting here right now and I take pictures and meanwhile I want to do a podcast. You know what I'm saying? Like the technology and the skill set of being able to understand how all that works has been like forced upon everybody.
Right. Yeah.
And so guys like you who already have the skill set of understanding sound and understanding production. Yeah. It's like a no-brainer to now some of this was never going to go away. I think there's going to be that component going forward from now on. It's like,
for sure.
I imagine, I don't know how much of it will change or if I don't think it'll scale back too much. I think that it's going to become part of the, think of like, people doing interviews for like movies when they go on a promotional tour. Well, now they do, instead of going on a promotional tour, they're just sitting in their house and they're getting the same content. But if they can get someone like you to say, hey, we're going to keep doing this streaming thing, but we're going to do it first class. So we're going to have someone like Matt show up at your house, set up the whole thing and break it down, so they can do their press junkets from home, that kind of thing. I don't think that's going away.
And I think there's something I've been thinking about is when people stream, you're able to reach the entire world at once through the internet. Whereas when you go on tour, you're reaching one city a night, so to speak. So in a way, like touring is, you're reaching a market that has a cap on it, so to speak, of how many people can fit in the venue that you're playing at night after night. Whereas when you stream online, kind of the entire world is your audience, to potentially. So there's something about that you're able to kind of reach broader markets every time you do something. But I've also noticed, bands, they stream, at least starting out, and have like their Venmo or PayPal to get like donations to sort of make up for like ticket sales that they lost on the canceled tours.
Yeah.
And I've noticed the first time or two a band does it like a live stream, the donations are like really heavy and people are really pumped about it. But if people stream like every week or like really often and like they're kind of always doing it, every band has told me like, yeah, the donations like kind of start dropping off pretty heavily, because then it becomes a similar thing of like, if your buddy is a local musician or whatever and they have like a regular gig, they play 3 times a week in town, they kind of oversaturate the market where it's that idea
they're
of
only
like,
going to attract the tourists. The people that are local would be like, yeah, we've seen that. Or it's twice this week.
I'm not feel too bad if I miss it this week, because I'll just see you next week. And people will also be like, well, I donated to you last week, so I probably won't do it this week. Whereas when you go on tour, a band probably only comes to your town once or twice, maybe 3 times a year. And so you only have a chance to see them perform a couple times a year. So you're willing to like buy that ticket every time they come and have that experience. Whereas if it's available to you constantly, there's less of an incentive to like continually.
For the streaming side. Now, the live experience of seeing a band, though, there's nothing, you can't replace it with streaming.
Right.
And there was something like prior to him completely like just falling apart, his career falling apart and getting canceled, Ryan Adams, I'm sure I was a big Ryan Adams fan. Sure. I really was a fan of the music. Sorry. I'm not sorry that I'm a fan of the music,
the man
but
knows how to write some songs.
He's a piece of garbage, but he's a talented piece of garbage. Yeah. And it's really, hopefully that guy, I don't know why I have to say this, but hopefully he will get better. Sure. Because there was a lot, there was a truly broken person behind those songs.
Yeah.
In so many ways, and unfortunately, it affected other people, and it sucks. But the point I was making is during like the last tour he was on before all this happened, the last time he was touring, him and his guitarist, Todd, they would set up their phones on either side of the stage, and on their respective Instagram accounts, they would stream every night.
Oh, wow.
They'd do the show. And then you could switch between Todd and Ryan's Instagram accounts to look at the live feed, so you can get one side of the stage or the other side of the stage. Cool. And it was really kind of like, it was awesome. Did it take away from ticket sales? Or no, it just enhanced it, because people who were fans would get to be able to check out what was going on wherever he was playing, if it was a festival or a club, whatever it was, or a theater. you could watch it that night, and you'd still buy tickets when he came to your town because why? You know what I'm saying? You're not getting the same experience in a live stream as a live show. So I think that aspect of it could stay permanently.
For sure.
Like venues could offer that. I was talking to John Kenny at the Royal American about maybe that be something in the future where if you invest in that now to kind of transition, but it'll be something that'll be there forever so that people around the world could watch the, famous Royal American shows and see what's going on at the Royal American on any given night. And I think that would be awesome. I don't think it would take away from anyone. I think it would just only serve to enhance it and promote not only the club, but each band.
I agree. Yeah.
Yeah.
And seeing how people have moved to streaming as out of a necessity when this all started to even in the few months that it's been going on, how just even in the Charleston scene and crew that I've been around working with, like how much the production value has gone up in the short amount of time that people have started doing it. Like when it first started happening, it was like one camera and decent audio. And like now the crew that I work with mostly has this like whole operation where it's like multi cameras, a drone that streams in 4K in real time, all these cameras. You can even sync like iPhones to it wirelessly. I'm able to multi-track and do a band and mix it like off my recording software Logic and basically mix the audio like I would a studio mix and pipe that to the stream. And so it's really cool just to learn that world and see how those guys have they have like walkie talkies where they can the camera guys can talk to each other and be like, all right, I'm going to get this shot. And they have a control switchboard guy who's controlling all the camera angles to the stream, like using an iPad, and just watching to see them be like, all right, we can't book our bands anymore. What are we going to do? Let's move to streaming, to see where it started and just where it is now in the short amount of time has been really cool to see how people are kind of upping it. And
it's funny because buying any kind of equipment that is related to that, like Black Magic interfaces, microphones, like quality microphones, everything has been such a hard thing to get because of that.
Everyone is wants
the rush to up the game, and to make it look as good as it did in a studio anywhere. And it's a skill set that I think is going to it's another blade on your Swiss Army knife now that you've got, which is awesome. So before we started recording, you were saying you went to school for a completely different field of work.
Yeah.
So let's go back in time, right before college. Let's just talk about how you got into music, what were your influences, and all that kind of stuff. Did it start with drums?
The first instrument I learned was guitar because my older brother, who's 4 years older than me, started learning how to play guitar. And I was probably in the 5th grade, and
damn, that's early.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
I looked up to my brother a lot growing up, and because he started playing guitar, of course, I wanted to also start learning how to play guitar. So my parents rented us a guitar, and so I was always just played around the house, and he kind of taught me how to play basic power chords and stuff. And growing up, I was obsessed with Green Day and Blink-182 and bands like that. So I learned how to play guitar by reading tabs and just playing Blink-182 songs and just power chords and stuff. And then my brother moved on to learning bass. And when I was that age, I didn't have any interest in learning the bass at that time. And I was so young, the bass was so big. It was
hurt your fingers. Those strings are heavy.
Guitar was more important to me at the time. So I continued just to kind of learn the guitar. But my uncle was a drummer, and he donated an old drum kit to my family, which was out in our garage. And I used to mess around on it. And I remember one day, or around the time I was in the 6th grade, I just sat down the drums and beats just started clicking. It just naturally, the drums just made the most sense to me.
Yeah.
Whereas guitar was an effort of learning it. And it was I had to just work at it until I learned it. Drums, for whatever reason, are just felt like my instrument,
I'm so jealous of that because I am so rhythmically challenged that I get the drum thing and I could hold a beat for a measure and then I go off time completely. Yeah. I'm just terrible at keeping time.
I don't know what it was. And so I'm fortunate that my uncle was a drummer and kind of gave donated that kit to us, and I kind of had that at my disposal. And so, my older brother, he had a band with his high school friends, and so me and my middle school friends like kind of formed a garage band and started jamming with each other. And
what was the name of your band?
We were called, I think our first band name was like Underage Tragedy, like our little 11-year-old kids.
Your 11-year-old emo band
in Charlotte, North Carolina, middle class,
That's awesome.
Then we were Signature Story for a while. And then
that's a pretty cool name. That could work.
We thought so when we were 12.
But then you start shortening it and we're like, yo, Sixto is playing. Yeah. There you go. You could have been Sixto.
That would have been
opening
cool.
for Susto.
Oh man, yeah. But and it started just by jamming in the garage with my neighborhood friends, and I kind of fell into starting into the world of recording by, my parents had a PC desktop computer, and at the time they had those little like pencil microphones that stuck out of the you plugged in, and it was just
bendy.
Yeah, one of those. And I remember just setting that up in the garage, and it was like a one live take on this free recording software called Audacity that they had back in the day on Windows. And
it's still there.
Is it? Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so had that one little crappy computer mic, and just at least having something that was like recorded was cool at that point. And then in high school, around the time I was in the 9th grade or 10th grade, like the MacBook came out and GarageBand became a thing.
Oh yeah.
And then when GarageBand came out, that was like my whole world like opened up. And then all of a sudden I could like, synthesize all these instruments using a MIDI keyboard and just like my headphones and my laptop and one microphone. And I could create like all these like
a full band
in the computer. So that really kind of opened me up. And I was also still playing in bands. In high school, I was in a band that I played guitar and sang in. And then I had another band that I played the drums in. And kind of by the time I got out of high school, I realized the drums were something I wanted to pursue more as like a performing instrument.
Yeah.
But yeah, I played in bands and played music through high school. Started just kind of learning more about recording just out of like wanting to record my bands and songs that I had written for fun. And going into college, I, continued to do it for fun, but I started to meet other people and like singers that I would start to collaborate with. And I would meet people and be like, hey, like, I figure out so-and-so has a great voice or whatever, and be like, I record music in my bedroom for fun. Like we should write a song and record it together. So that kind of turned into like me working with other people and sort of doing this and that. And after a while, like I realized I had a little bit of like an umbrella of like a portfolio of music, whether it was like the bands I played in, my own personal songs, or songs that I had like done with other people. And if someone were to ask me like, can I listen to something you've recorded? I was kind of having to send them to a bunch of different sites to like be like, oh, well, my band's music's over here and this person's over here and my stuff's over here. So that's kind of where the idea of Coast Records came about. It was to create like an umbrella or like a hub or a brand for me to kind of put all of my productions and recordings and stuff that I was working on under. And actually, my mom, shout out to my mom, came up with the name Coast Records.
There you go.
Cool.
Look at that.
So I created, like Coast Records came about when I was in college, and it was pretty much just to have that umbrella of stuff that I'd worked on. And that sort of also developed into sort of like an indie record label, quote unquote, like kind of collective of like my buddies who were songwriters in Charleston. And we kind of were doing stuff together and putting on shows. And it was kind of just to sort of create a scene and kind of create this thing where like, Coast Records, kind of like the whole is greater than the sum of its parts, where like if so-and-so heard about this songwriter, they might check out Coast and check out other songwriters on it. Or if they know about Coast Records, they might check out the people who were like, I say with quotations, signed to the label. Yeah. And it was I never did it as like, I get a percentage of your music or rights to your songs. It was more of just like, let's all be a part of this like collective thing and kind of create a scene around town and kind of make some noise and do this. And it was sort of a supplemental thing where like the more people found out about Coast, like as it being like a label, it got attention to people wanting to come like record with me and be a part of it and stuff like that. So it was just sort of a way to like, for me to help promote artists that I worked with and my friends who were doing stuff, and for them to sort of have this thing that they could be a part of too, that we could all kind of grow together when we were like 21 coming out of college and stuff like that.
So it's truly an independent scene that you're creating. Was it something you had planned to be that way, or was it just something that like started to develop around what you were doing? You're like, okay, I'm just gonna ride this.
I think the label side of it, like I never really wanted to be like a label executive, so to speak.
Right.
Like the studio and like recording and production is where my heart lies for sure. But at the time, it was something I kind of just wore both hats to a degree, and just it just kind of came about of wanting to build something and create that scene. And yeah, I don't know. It just sort of I had my group of friends that in college, like a strong core of them were singer-songwriters and artists and stuff, and so we all kind of just like bonded together through this thing and kind of helped promote it and each other and put on shows. And, you know, we do like the Coast Records show at wherever featuring these artists. And it was like, it's just sort of a way to kind of make a stink around town.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, it's a difficult thing for a lot of musicians, specifically singer-songwriters. They might not be, you can have the most amazing, talented, insightful, just beautiful poet of a singer-songwriter type person who is technically unable to record themselves, friggin' doing anything, let alone record a song that makes it sound the way it should sound, or, you know, a good representation of it. And it's good to have that because they have something that you're like, oh, I can make that sound the way it sounds in your head. Right, I know exactly what you're trying to do. And then, you know, fulfill that need. And really form a collective of combining the different talents. So then you get to play on other people's stuff as well.
Sure. Yeah. If it's needed.
You get to kind of be a session musician as well. That's kind of fun.
Yeah. Sometimes I'll work with, you know, bands that come in and they're like, hey, we got our songs written and rehearsed. We pretty much know what we want to lay down. So in that instance, I'm kind of more of like an engineer, and I'm there to capture the best performances and make it sound as good as it can and how they want to sound. And sometimes I work with a singer-songwriter who just has a song written on acoustic guitar with a vocal, and they need a full band arrangement put around it. So at that point, it's more of like, you know, there's a producer role and I'll play drums on it, or we'll bring in session players as needed. And, you know, it's kind of like creating the whole arrangement and the full thing around the skeleton of the song that they started with. So that's always fun. It kind of is a sliding scale, and every project is a little bit different. And so it stays interesting.
All right. So how does this all tie into what you went to school for?
So
explain to it what you went to school for, that whole.
I got my degree in economics from College of Charleston.
Like every musician.
Yeah.
Wait, what?
Yeah. Growing up, I played baseball. That was like I played year round pretty much my entire life.
Wow.
Yeah. I was a huge baseball player. And so in high school, when I was looking at colleges, at first it was like, do I want to go play ball in college, or do I just want to go somewhere that I want to go and just be a college kid and all that? And it got to a point where I could have gone and played baseball like at a smaller school somewhere, probably not a school I would have chosen to go to on my own. Or I fell in love with College of Charleston and really wanted to go there. So I decided I realized trying to go pro wasn't really my dream. So I realized going to try to play college baseball was not really necessary or worth it, because it's such a commitment to playing a college sport. And it limits
your playing field of colleges to choose from, because now you're looking at a place where you'll make the team and start.
Yeah.
And be a good enough team and all those things. Yeah.
Yeah. So
the sports thing is nuts in
it's
college
crazy.
sports.
Yeah. So I decided to go to College of Charleston and just go to school. And I knew that, you know, music has always, and recording and all that has always been something I've wanted to continue to pursue. So, you know, going into college, you know, I had like pressure from, you know, my folks and stuff about, not pressure, but they kind of encouraged me to like look into being an accounting major and, you know, eventually become a CPA and have like a career like that, which is like an excellent career. But, you know, going into the pre-major or whatever of the accounting path after taking some classes, I just realized that sort of like world and type of work was just not where
it's a specific type of person.
For sure. And I learned that's not me. So I switched over to economics because I took my intro econ class freshman year of college, and I had an excellent professor who really made the subject enjoyable to me. And I was attracted to economics because it is more of like a social science in the sense of like it's business, but it's reflected on like why people are the way they are, or why do they like buy things a certain way or react a certain way to things. And there was more of like a psychology to it and a personality of like people to it.
So wait, do you actually understand why the stock market is doing so well during the pandemic when the global economy has gone to shit? So you understand that?
Not really. No.
I don't think anyone understands that.
But yeah, so econ was I enjoyed it, but I kind of, just because I was in college, I wanted to kind of get that business degree and just have something that I could always fall back on, I guess, in case music didn't work out for whatever reason. And looking back on it, I'm glad that I did it that way, just because taking like business classes and finance classes and stuff like that, like definitely it's helps, like, because, if you're a producer or own a studio, or like I am a small business owner, a sole proprietor, and my company's an LL. It's just having basic knowledge of stuff like that helps you run a business if you're doing something like that. So
you don't get caught in these weird traps, because once you start making money, if you don't know what you're doing, you're going to get a big wake up call when it's like, oh, well, you got to pay all this money in taxes. And you're like, oh, what? Who? What? If you didn't know.
Yeah, there's still stuff I learn every day or like every year when stuff like that comes around that I'm like, man, I can't believe we never taught this in school or any, like.
I just found out about the 6,000 pound vehicle loophole.
What's that?
I didn't even know that this existed.
I mean, what's that?
If you own a truck for your business, that's, and it could be a large SUV, as long as it's over 6,000 pounds, like your depreciation value on it, it's something like $25,000 the first year or something like that you get a write-off on your taxes.
Oh my God.
It's like a $25,000. And I'm like, this is insane. My brain exploded when my wife was explaining it to me, because we were talking about like, all right, what are different ways we can, like, what are things we can, because we're both business owners. We're just discussing. She's like, yeah, we could buy a truck and use that. And I'm like, I don't want a truck. I drive like a hybrid. You know what I'm saying? I don't need a truck. And I was all pissed off when she's telling me this. I'm like, because they just introduced this new tax for hybrids and electric vehicles where they charge you every couple of years an extra like $100 because you use less gas and you're paying less in gas taxes than regular cars. So they want to charge you just for trying to be responsible. I don't know. But if you buy a 6,000 pound gas guzzling truck, they'll give you 25 grand. The world is weird, man.
Yeah.
Anyway, I went off on that tangent, but these are the types of things that, like, when you're running a business, you start finding out about, and you're like, no wonder why the world is nuts. Yeah. Like, this is why we have a reality show president. It's because we have really stupid games that we play, and we get this stupid prize of leadership.
It's I feel like when people get like really successful or wealthy and they have the means of hiring the best CPAs and
they find out all this,
they know all the loopholes and like it is like kind of playing the game of like how to do
where
this
can you
and
put
that.
it? Well, I can take it when you find out, like, I've got $1,000 here. I can either just give it to the government, or I can donate half of it to a charity and put the other half of it in this other thing. And, you could do all that. So you try to decide, well, how do you want to disperse this money that you made that you can't keep? So you're like, where do I put this to get the most out of that money? And like, where's the most beneficial place to put this? So you start thinking in those terms. And then when you start finding out all these little loopholes, you start losing your mind, because you're like, well, no wonder, like, it's so hard to get from point A to B, of point A being just like somebody just starting out in the world trying to figure out how to pay their bills, to be, somebody who's running their own business and hopefully getting their shit together. And then you're like, well, that barrier to get from A to B is so crazy. Mm-hmm. And it's because all the things that you're doing when you get to that point to try to, you know what I'm saying? Like, instead of helping each other all do well, it's kind of like, well, the I got mine mentality starts to set in, and you're like, well, how can I protect my success? How can I protect my money? And it's a weird thing. I don't know how we got way off on this tangent. But yes, it's an awesome knowledge to have going into what you're doing, to have that knowledge of business, because most musicians don't know any. That's why they get famously screwed. It's why they're famously getting screwed right now as we speak by Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon, whoever's streaming their music and not paying them for it.
Yeah.
And it's pretty crazy. I was just seeing the RIAA is going after software companies that write programs to pull YouTube content straight off of YouTube without having to like, you know what I'm saying? Like they're going after the companies that are making the software to rip YouTube videos. I'm like, I think the amount of people watching music videos on YouTube is a tiny fraction compared to, watching whatever.
Sure.
You know, people falling down videos is probably a lot. So, but that's where their attention is to try to protect themselves. But none of that money that they're trying to accumulate is going to the artists. So the music industry is a really screwed up business. So to go into work in the music business in all the different ways that you're working in it and have kind of an economics understanding and a business background, you're like the Swiss Army knife here.
Well, and like you said, I mean, it's music, but it still is the music business.
Right.
So it helped. I mean, for everyone, even artists, like you're saying, like if you have a little bit of a business sense to yourself, even if you're a songwriter, being able to understand those things, at least to a somewhat of a degree, will only help you anytime you get offered a deal or anything like that moving forward. And like you were saying, like so many people in the past, like back in the day, artists would get signed to these major labels, and so many of them got screwed because they didn't know any better about what any of these things meant. And they maybe get given this, signing bonus or whatever, and they get thrown some cash up front or given a car or whatever, and they think that they got all this stuff, but at the end of the day, they're getting like screwed on the back end or things like that. So it's just like, the more you can, teach yourself and learn and understand about stuff like that, I feel like you'll be stronger off in deals like that.
I was just the Replacements. Just they put out like a reissue of "Pleased to Meet Me." Are you a fan of the Replacements at all?
Yeah.
All right, so they put out a reissue, and they were telling they posted this story about how they named it, which was when they had recorded it before they had a name for the album, the label threw this like party for them and they had to meet all these different record executives and people in the business to celebrate this upcoming record and whatnot. And I'm reading it thinking, they paid for that party.
Oh yeah.
There's a reason why the Replacements had to do this reunion tour a couple of years ago.
For sure.
It's because they still owed money to Sire Records for all of their old records that they had basically snorted, drank, and done all the things that rock stars did back in the 80s and 90s. And so, yeah, it's pretty crazy. Like people don't know that. Like every expense that occurs around a band when they're on a record label, the band is actually paying for
sure.
And they have no control over that.
Yeah.
Like that band had no idea that there was this extravagant party was being thrown on their dime.
Yeah.
Like they didn't know.
A buddy of mine read the drummer of that band Semisonic that has Closing Time. He wrote a book and had a similar story. Like their label they were signed to would send out like the A&R rep who would take care of them, and they'd take them out to these like nice fancy steak dinners and bottle service and
all recoupable.
Run up a $5,000 dinner tab or whatever. And the band was made to feel like the label was like taking them out and whining and dining them and we got you them. And then like 6 months later they'd get their bill for it and realize that like the band owes the label $5,000 for that dinner or whatever. It's like so skeevy. It's that stuff, like all those things going on, and people had no idea that it was happening at the time.
Well, I like the idea of how you're framing your Coast Records as being more of a collective than a traditional label, because it needs to be rethought. It needs to be kind of back to, I imagine when you do something like that, right? And you're not coming at it from a hey, let's screw these guys without them knowing it type of mentality. And you're like, hey, I just want to make music. I want to do cool stuff. And this is my livelihood. This is how we're going to, fund it and all this other things. You'd be transparent about it. Then you're going to attract much better musicians. You're going to attract, an amazing class of people. I don't know if class is the right word, but, amazing group of
I know what
people,
you mean. Yeah.
you know, people who are a little bit more conscientious about things.
And I run, if I were to call Coast a label like that, I run it now in a sense of where like I have a team of people around me that do different things. So, you know, I make my living recording and producing the music in the studio, and I offer, you know, resources to artists or bands. Like if they need photography done or a music video made or like a live session made or graphic design or album artwork or a website or
you connect all
logos,
the dots.
I can help connect the dots for all these people so they can kind of put their whole press kit or whatever they need to make their release or their album or single or whatever they're doing successful. Like, so I have a crew of people. A lot of them are my band members and human resources. Everyone has a really excellent skill set, and I'll often hire them if a band or an artist needs a video made or, you know, a photo done or album artwork, and can kind of connect all those dots for people. So in a sense, it's sort of turned into like Coast can be like a one-stop shop for a band or an artist if they need things done other than just the recording of the album or the single or the EP. They can kind of get everything handled there.
They can get hooked up with the right people. And it's a very punk rock mindset. It really is. It's just like, you know, a bunch of people that are talented and you can facilitate all this stuff, and it's not going to make them go broke.
Yeah.
You know,
I don't be like, all right, I get 15% of that, what you're getting paid, because it's like I put the deal together.
Right.
Like,
No, you're like,
I just try to connect people and help make it happen. And, you know, I charge what I charge to make my living doing what I do. And
it always works out, because then they'll, you know, the same thing. So if you talk to a guy who does videography, and then he's talking to a client who needs some sort of audio work, he's going to be like, oh, call Matt.
Yeah.
And here's your guy, you know. So it always works out. Like the looking for kickbacks thing is always a bad idea, because then it just taints, because now you're thinking as the person who maybe figures that out, goes like, well, he only sent me to this person because he's getting a kick of it, you know, he's getting a piece of it, so maybe I shouldn't trust this. Meanwhile, but if you're just sending it because you know it's the right person for the right job,
right,
totally different mindset,
for sure.
And again, it goes back to the whole thing of this collective mindset, this kind of bringing people together, like-minded people together. It's so cool, you know. Charleston really is a ripe place for that kind of mentality.
And it's been cool to, you know, I've been in Charleston for almost 10 years now. And coming out of college, I was, you know, recording people like out of my bedroom in my apartments and stuff, still just kind of doing what I could with the space that I had. And I still had to work other part-time jobs. Like I worked at a retail store, folding t-shirts, I bar backed. I was just doing whatever I could to make extra cash, and then doing sessions as I could. And I did that for a couple of years after college. And I finally got to a point where I had just enough lined up to record, where I knew that if I could dedicate my time full time to recording, that I could get the projects, you know, recorded and mixed and kind of finished in time enough to make enough money to like pay my rent that month or whatever. Like I would make the same amount that I was making at my $10 an hour retail job. Right. So I remember at one point when I was like 24, so I like made that leap of, fortunately, awesome. The job I had at the time, it was a small local business, and my boss was really cool, and he let me just like go off the schedule indefinitely, so I didn't have to like quit. Wow. I was just like, do you mind if I just like in a couple weeks, like just, you know, if I just don't work for a while? And because he knew that, you know, my goal and passion was to, you know, grow a recording business, not fold t-shirts. He
knew. Well, of course, when you're working in retail.
Yeah, you don't stick around forever.
No,
you know? So
it gets a little weird if you do stick around too long. They're like, shouldn't you be off doing something else?
So fortunately, he was really cool about it, and he let me do it. And very fortunately, like once I made that leap, it's one of those things where, you know, it kind of snowballs. Like once you become that person in your community and you start doing it full time, people start to see you as that's what you do, and you become better at it and more efficient, and that's who you, the identity that you start to have, and people look at you that way, and more people start to. So once I kind of started moving in that direction, it kind of just like I started recording more and meeting more people, and honestly, running sound at the Royal American is an amazing networking thing. Like I kind of have been able to have my pulse on like the new bands and who's playing in town and who's, got this sound and who's, coming through, and I get to meet all these bands and kind of form relationships with them. And, so I've definitely like got to record bands and met bands just through them playing at Royal and me running sound for them.
Well, can you imagine you're a band and you're playing like a string of just, I'm not going to say mediocre, but just, acceptable sound setups.
Yeah.
Then you get to Royal American, you take a look and you be like, all right, it's going to be another one of these days.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden they meet you and they get the sound going and they're like, whoa, this sounds like amazing.
Yeah. You don't expect it when you first walk in and see the
It's unassuming.
It's unassuming and it's cool. And I try to always be very friendly and cool to the bands. And a lot of times, being someone who's gone on tour and played in venues, like sound guys can definitely have the rap of being like these old, jaded kind of asshole, like
just kind of
like
angry.
their band didn't make it in the 90s. So they're, like running sound at the local dive and, they're just not, they don't want to be there. And so I try to kind of be the opposite and be like engaged and friendly and like kind of like provide them what they want and make their experience there great. And so I think it's like kind of refreshing for bands that are on tour. And like you were saying, like a lot of the times maybe they have mediocre experiences with places or sounds. And so I try to just kind of over deliver or like make their experience there as enjoyable as possible. And I think when you're out on the road for a long time, like having an experience like that can be really appreciated, I think.
Yeah. Well, that whole place is just, I noticed it when I started going there as a fan coming in there. I was like, oh, they're doing this right. This is like somebody's dream come true of how to organize a live venue. And it's so cool.
John Kinney being a musician that's done it all, toured, like, I mean, he gets it. Like it's run by someone who has been there and understands it. And
he surrounds himself obviously with people like you who also are.
And he cares about what's current and like it's not like, oh, this is how he did it back in the day, and I refuse to adapt to like anything that's new. I mean, Royal has its vibe, but it's John keeps his head down to the pulse of what's going on, and that's so important.
It's interesting because there are bands in there that have come through, and I just had Pip the Pansy on here, and it's something that like probably would have went over my head unless I saw it live.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? And saw it in that place and got that experience because it's just like, oh, okay, this kicks ass.
Yeah.
And if I had heard it like just kind of, if it was introduced to me in a different way,
sure,
and maybe in a shitty club with a shitty sound system, I might not appreciate it. I might just be like, okay, whatever. And
there's been times where like a show might be happening somewhere and it's almost like, I just maybe I'll wait till the next one if it's like if the sound is so bad somewhere or like the experience is just.
I felt like that. I don't want to throw anyone in the bus because the last few times I've been there, it's been fine. But there's a music venue that a lot of kind of bigger acts will play. Should I say the name? Who cares? The Music Farm. The place sounds like ass half the time.
It's a tough room. It's
mixed such a big cavernous place.
I gotta say, shout out to McLean that he's somehow made that room sound amazing. The last Halloween when Suso played, it sounded
great,
amazing in there. But I'm with you. I've seen, especially if it's like a touring
and they have their own
front of house engineer who doesn't know the room. I've mixed in that room and it's so hard to make sound good, especially if it's like not sold out and it's empty. Like there's only 100 people in there or so, and it's just echoey and huge, and it's almost like there's only so much you can do, like
years ago when I first moved here, I saw Paul Westerberg play there. And I think the way they handled it for that show was they made it so loud that I was uncomfortable.
Yeah.
That I was like, I love Paul Westerberg. I love the Replacements, but I was starting to get like uncomfortable with the volume. Like I was like, this is yeah.
It gets really loud in there sometimes. But sometimes if it's the right volume, I like standing right by the speakers because then you don't even hear the room really.
Well, yeah. And if you get up to the stage and you can hear their mix, it's a lot less
Yeah.
Yeah. But anyway, again, yeah. And I did preface it by saying lately it's been a lot better as far as like the last few times. The last show I went before the lockdown, I was working a show there. I was working a festival and Modest Yahoo played. And he sounded great.
Yeah.
Like it sounded fine. But there have been times, like I said, seeing someone I love where it's just like completely like, oh.
Yeah. I've experienced that too, for sure. Yeah.
So anyway, when you started getting into the recording, was there a sound engineer or a producer or something like that you were like looking up to, going like, how did that you kind of followed, or was it all more of just trying to get what was in your head?
I got into recording more so out of wanting to get out what was in my head. Having like learned guitar and then drums, I used to write my own songs a lot. So it was more of like, I learned recording as a means to just make the idea, like make full band arrangements out of songs that I had written in the computer. So I could like play the drums on my MIDI keyboard and play bass lines on the keyboard and keyboard parts, and then play the guitar recorded straight into the computer and do my vocals straight through the interface. And then, I just kind of did it. And for a couple of years when I was like 18 or so, I started recording a ton of covers. And looking back on it, I don't think I did it for this purpose at the time, but it was a great experience for me to like learn production and like sound design and like listening to songs and trying to like identify all the elements that were actually going on in a recording, like even stuff like way in the background or subtle things, or hearing like synth sounds or tones and trying to like replicate that sound myself. And it taught me a lot about like how to, what the knobs on like synthesizers do, and even like in the computer, or how like EQ or effects or compression works and stuff like that. And it helped me learn like arrangements. And so I just did I recreated all these songs like across different genres, like whether it was like pop or, country or rock or whatever. And looking back, I think that was definitely like a really impactful, helpful, like learning experience for me to do that. And then as I've gotten older, there's been people I've learned to like really appreciate their work. Like Sean Everett is an engineer producer who does like, The War on Drugs, Alabama Shakes, like a ton of stuff. And he's a crazy looking guy. If you look at him, he's like totally like wild, but he's like a phenomenal mind, an engineer.
From my experience when I was in a band back in the day, as they say, every engineer was definitely like, they were like mole people.
Yeah.
Like they would be in a tiny little room, not much bigger than this, sometimes smaller, behind a giant mixing board, getting just bathed in sound all day long or all night long, usually. Because they would do most recording, like I grew up in New York, so most recording studios only operated at night.
Yeah.
Because they'd be in like a commercial environment and they just couldn't make noise during the day. So they would start at like 5-6 o'clock and then record all night. And they'd be finishing up at like, 5 a.m., 6 a.m. That was like the lifestyle of all the recording engineers that I had any experience of dealing with. And it was just like, whoa, it's a crazy lifestyle.
Yeah. I've started taking vitamin D supplements because I never see the sun.
You should be taking them anyway at this point. we all should be just like, popping those things like crazy. It's one of those. So there's no other like, let's go back here because you have so many different things you do. When you started playing guitar, it was pop punk. It was Green Day, and
so when I was like a kid, like I've always loved like pop music. Like I'm not afraid to say like the Backstreet Boys, NSYNC, Britney Spears, like all that stuff was.
All hitting when you were at the right age.
Yeah, I loved it, and I loved just like the production quality of it. Of these like Max Martin did a lot of those productions, and his sound of just the sounds that he would get and like how good the recordings sounded and like the arrangements and just all of it and like how catchy the melodies were. That just always really resonated with me. And so I think that sort of attraction to like pop elements in music has always stuck with me. And then as I got a little bit older, like having an older brother and sort of it being like the late 90s, early 2000s, like I got really into like Blink-182 and Green Day and Weezer and bands like that. and playing instruments, I got more kind of taking that pop element and applying it to like a rock band.
Yeah.
Kind of was the natural thing. And then when I got into middle school, I started to get more into like emo music of like I loved like
My Chemical Romance was probably
stuff
big
like
at that time.
Like Census Fail, Seosin, like Taking Back Sunday,
Thursday.
all that stuff I was obsessed with. And I still listen to it. Like that will always have a place in my heart forever. And so I've kind of like my roots were like pop and pop punk and like emo music. And then when I got into high school and college, I started, I had a phase of like loving like jam bands. And
I think when you got to you moved to Charleston for college at Charleston.
Mm-hmm.
So there's something about this area where that kind of music where you appreciate it.
Yeah.
Even if you didn't like it before, when you kind of like live in the environment where that kind of stuff is kind of born and conceived, you get it. The pace is a little slower. The groove is different. You know what I'm saying? It's just like life. It fits the lifestyle here
for sure
a little bit more than say a Blink-182 or something like that. Because, I grew up in New York where I grew up with like the Ramones and that kind of stuff where that was the frequency of the environment.
Right.
And then you come down here and it's like all of a sudden you start to understand the alt country, that kind of jam bandy type of thing.
And for me, like the first like jam band that I got really into was Umphreys McGee, who a couple of members live in Charleston. And funny enough, like now I run sound with Doom Flamingo, who Ryan Stasek, the bass player of Umphreys, plays in Doom. So it's kind of crazy, like all these years later, like a band that I was like one of my favorite bands is like a colleague. Like I work with him in this band now. It's crazy. But for me, like in high school and in college, the iteration of Human Resources, we were a different band back then called Donnie.
We haven't even, by the way, hit on Human Resources. We're like almost an hour in and we haven't even hit on your band. That's awesome. So
so before we were Human Resources, we in high school and college, we were called Donnie Dies, and we were more of a jam band. And
now, is that a Donnie Darko?
Funny enough,
no.
It's not actually. When I was in the 9th grade,
there's my Donnie Darko.
Yeah.
/ Phoebe Bridgers
1 year
Halloween costume.
When we were Donnie Dies, we played a Halloween show one year that we were all different Donnies, and I was Donnie Darko that year.
There you go.
Yeah.
Sorry. Continue.
When I was like in the 9th grade, I had this weird phase of like naming stuff like these really long, ridiculous names for this band, and I came up with, for some reason, Danny Dies a Horrible Death, thinking it would be a funny name to like call. It sounds like a death metal band or something. Like
The World is a Beautiful Place. I'm no longer afraid to die, which is the most insanely annoying band that's really good.
Yeah,
because that title is too long.
So I wanted to make this like kind of like name that was like really long and ridiculous for a band that like we made like music that sounded like it was like happy and like just at the time we were like a 3-piece instrumental, just like jazz fusion like rock group thing. So I kind of wanted to make a name that didn't fit the music at all.
Wow.
But Dries, who's the guitar player in Human Resources and Donnie Dies at the time, his brother's name was Danny. So we were like, we can't call the band Danny Dies a Horrible Death. So it turned into Donnie Dies a Horrible Death. Got shortened to Donnie Dies. So honestly, it was just random and being a weird. It
just sounded like
weirdo.
Danny. Yeah.
But yeah, Donnie Darko has the reference. And then also Big Lebowski, we realized later, has the Donnie Dies reference. But it was just... It was just a random
So
name.
how did you come up with the name Human Resources, which is everyone's least favorite department in any business they've ever worked for?
I think also it was a little bit of just sort of making a name. So I came to Charleston before the rest of the guys in HR came down. And when everyone was like finishing college and coming down to Charleston, we at the time had sort of been writing like a new style of music. And trying to get away from like the jam band world that we had been playing. The rest of the guys went to App State up in Boone, North Carolina. So we were playing up in like this like Boone, Asheville, sort of a little bit more like hippie, sort of like the strong jam band scene up there. And, so we were playing a lot of like 3-hour gigs where, our songs would be like 30 minutes long and, a lot of improvising and stuff like that. And it was a lot of fun at the time, but we were coming out of college, like getting more interested in like writing songs that had like they were like 3 minutes long with verses and choruses and like had parts and
pop songs,
pop songs, you know? So we kind of were writing this new music and everyone was moving to Charleston and we sort of had this like chance to sort of like rebrand and create like a new group fresh in Charleston.
Yeah.
So we kind of made it, we started recording a new album and Paul, our keyboardist, came up with Human Resources and we were just throwing out names for like a couple months while we were, you know, and I think actually he threw that out at one point and no one really latched onto it at first. And then it kind of came back around a little bit later. And it was one of those things where it's like, oh, it's going to be really hard to find us on the internet if you just type in Human Resources to try, you know, like it was almost like it was like funny enough to be like I don't know, just like.
It puts this weird thing like, what are you doing tonight? I'm going to see Human Resources. Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. What'd you do? Like, wait, what? Why are you going tonight to see what? You know,
we get a lot of, we used to get a lot of Facebook like invites to like corporate HR retreat events. Like people would tag our name in it, you know?
Yeah. It's, you guys took the path less traveled, the difficult, gravelly, like, oh, let's just pick a name that's going to make it very difficult to be. But at the end of the day, the music is freaking fantastic.
Thank
you guys hit on a nerve of something that was kind of going this shift to more of a, like you said, taking that aesthetic of kind of like a jazzy jam bandish type of thing, mixing it with more of a pop sound and creating pop songs where the music is just really interesting, but it's also concise.
Well, I think that period of like being in a more like jam band and allowing yourself to like improvise that much, you learn a lot about how your bandmates play and like the language that they're speaking when they're playing. And I've been playing with Aaron and Dries and Paul now, but I met Aaron and Dries in the 9th grade and we've been playing music together since then. We met Paul in college and have been playing together. So it's like, you know, playing parts consistently over and over is like what we like to do now. Cause it's like, it sounds tight and it's clean and sounds professional and stuff. But like when you're putting yourself out there, which is also like why bands like Fish and these jam bands have the thing that's so cool about them is like, they kind of put it out there on the line in a way that like, they don't totally know what's going to happen.
Yeah. There's a danger.
There's a danger to it. And it forces you to like listen to each other and to understand and like learn people, like where people are going and what they're trying to say. And I think it helps like us all learn our instrument better and how to play with each other better. And like a little bit of like a chops thing too, of just like getting better at your instrument and being able to like do things. And like, if you're going to try to pull off something on the spot to like, you know, you don't always land it, but to like know if you know, feel comfortable doing it or if you like hold back or like what's appropriate when and stuff like that. So I think it was a good experience for us to have done back then. But now, you know, we just want to like write good songs, and when we go play them live, it sounds good and it's consistent, and you know, you get something that's like quality every time. And
and you mentioned one of your bandmates, Dries. He's another Swiss Army knife kind of guy.
Yeah.
I mean, photographer, videographer, multi-instrumentalist, vocalist. Yeah. Like that guy's another one. I'm like, man, he's got all of it.
Yeah. Well, I think a little bit of why Human Resources fits our band is like we kind of do most of our stuff in-house as a group, whether it's the recording or videos or whatever. And so we sort of are our own like resources to our band, you know, and then we also do that for other groups as needed too, you know, like helping other bands do videos or recording and stuff like that, you know. It's like we offer ourselves as resources as needed, you know.
Man, that's just a wonderful thing to have, all of that skill set and knowledge within the unit, because is one of you a mechanic?
Far from it.
Because that was always when back in the day, it was like, all right, we either need a roadie or someone in the band who knows how to fix a car.
Yeah. We there's a street in our neighborhood. We all like live in the same neighborhood in downtown Charleston, funny enough now. And one of the streets floods really bad, and our van was parked in it, and it was like downpouring, and the street was filling up, and we went to start the car and it wouldn't start. Ironically, the battery had died in our van, like right when this flooding was happening. So there's a hilarious video of like the four of us just like trying to push this van like up this hill out of this like 2 feet of water, like in the downpour range, trying to like get this thing out up to dry land.
So did you guys tour as Human Resources?
We do sometimes. We'll do like little small regional runs, or a couple times a year we'll go to New York and back.
Right.
Part of the reason I think what makes HR a fun project for all of us and continues to stay fresh over the years is like Dries plays in Susto as well. So normally he's on tour with them a lot, and we all have our own things. Like I have the studio full time. Paul's a full-time videographer and photographer and designer. Aaron has his company. He does like tech stuff and website development and all that. So we all have our own things that we do as like our main careers. And then the band is something that we come together and do, but it's not done so much where it's like, it becomes like a constant burden for us. It's like always fun and something fresh and exciting. And we kind of try to,
you're not trying to make it big as a band. You're just,
it's
enjoying it.
It's not like all of our eggs, like the pressure is on and all of our eggs are in this one thing, when it's like, if it doesn't work, we're all, and so I think there's a little bit less of like feuding going on in the band, where it's like the tensions and the pressure is so high that it's like bands fall apart or start hating each other, because of stuff like that. We're able to kind of get together and make, our presence, I feel like exists mostly online. And so we try to, make music that, is enjoyable by people and can get like streamed, well and do things online. And, and then we'll go out on the road and we'll hit like, regional markets, or like I was saying, like we'll go to New York and back a couple times a year and things like that. But it's not something like we hit the road for like months on end at a time and just like drive around the country endlessly. I don't think any of us really have like a crazy interest in doing that, like outside.
Really?
Well, I think
it's interesting.
We would if it made sense to, but
if you got offered, like if some band said, if Band of Horses comes up to you and says, "Hey, we want you to open up for this like leg of the tour," you'd be like, "Yeah,
we would definitely do that.
We'll make that work
for sure." But just the whole like, let's just get in the van and like go play for 2 people in whatever town. Like I don't know.
But the paying the dues part is the hardest part of going on tour and doing that and playing for the sound guy
for sure
is brutal.
It is, yeah.
It's hard, and it seemed to be unavoidable back when I was playing in bands and things like that. But yeah, like now, as you said, the online presence where you can start building a fan base before you ever even get to a place.
And we try to use the internet as our biggest resource as a band. So that's kind of the focus right now. Just making songs and content and putting it out online and then going on tour when it makes sense, in a reasonable way.
Man, that's just awesome.
Yeah.
It's it's such an alien concept to me, to be in a band and just not have that kind of underlying thing of like, okay, we need to get to the next level. It's like, let's just write some songs and have some fun. And if something comes up, we'll take advantage of it. Like that's
yeah, it's been cool. And I think honestly, some cool opportunities have come about because of that, in a weird way. But
I think that collective mindset we were talking about at the beginning of this conversation kind of feeds into that.
Yeah.
Because I would imagine you're working with some pretty interesting musicians locally, and some regional or national or even international musicians that might come through here at some point, and they'll be like, you know what I'm saying? The connection is made there,
right?
And it's a natural connection. It's not a forced, solicited thing. It's like, oh, this is that guy. Oh, this is his band. And then, you never know. And then somebody would say, hey, we're coming to Charleston. Can you come open for us? Or something along those lines. It just will open all those doors.
For sure.
Man. So, okay. So for the Matt Zutell 5-year plan, where do you see, with all of these different things that you do, what's kind of like the near distant goal for you? Are you just kind of happy going with what you're doing? Are you working towards something? Do you have like a dream that you maybe want to work towards? Or what's the 5-year plan for Coast Records and Matt?
Well, I just moved into a new studio space this past year.
Timing.
Yeah. literally moved in the beginning of March, like right before it hit. But it's been fine. Fortunately, like I was saying, with what I do, a lot of my like in-person sessions got canceled, or postponed indefinitely /
But you've shifted, yeah.
But a lot of what I do is mixing too. So I was able to still like mix records, and people would send me sessions or files through the internet, and I could mix it myself in my studio and email them the mixes. And so I'm still able to work and interact and do stuff with people and be productive, by myself, using the internet. And
have you talked to Pip the Pansy? Because I think she mentioned she has an album ready to get mixed. She just hasn't found a mixer yet.
Oh.
Maybe you should call her up. Maybe you should send her a message. Be like, hey, send me some tracks. I'll do a mix for you. Tell me what you think.
Yeah.
That type of thing.
That's good
See,
enough.
this is that little thing. This is what we're talking about. The collective. The good people doing good things for each other. That's how like the world should be.
That's
okay.
true.
So you were still able to do mixing.
Yeah. So I fortunately had like 2 albums worth of mixes to do like early on. So that kind of, I was able, when everything shut down super hard,
keep the bills paid.
I was able to kind of continue to work for a bit. And then there was, slower periods, but I was honestly able to sort of do more of like passion projects, like human resources. We have a little side group called Human Stranger with the guys from Little Stranger. And we made a little 3-song EP that came out, I think back in like May, maybe. And it was like me and the guys in our band, we've been in our bubble together, we all live next to each other, and Dries lives above me. And
man, you guys have like just a thing.
Yeah.
You have like the punk rock cul-de-sac.
Yeah. We've literally taken over our neighborhood.
That's awesome.
And so, we would get together in the studio and make music, and we would send John and Kev from Little Stranger the stuff we were working on, the ideas, and they would record their parts from their house and send them back to me, and I would implement them into the sessions.
That's
and
so cool.
We kind of like made a couple songs like that way. And they're out on Spotify and stuff now. So that was like a fun little passion project, like side thing that because they tour so much all the time, and Dries is usually gone, like it's been hard to find the time where like all 6 of us can get together and do that. So
focus on something. Yeah.
Being forced, everyone being home, it was kind of like, it gave us a chance to actually do that. So we were able to do that. And then, started doing like live stream stuff. I've done several of them at the studio, done some like remotely. And then, I was able to kind of start to do like small, like safe sessions where it was like only like 1 or 2 people, and kind of being responsible about it. But the whole like just having a bunch of people coming and going every day, like I didn't do that for while this has been going on. So but it's been
so the future, you're going to continue to expand upon the recording and the sound engineering thing as a profession.
For sure. Yeah. Just continue to grow it, and, ideally make better records, and for myself to continue to get better, and, hopefully work with bigger bands and help the bands that I work with. Hopefully the records we make together helps them get to the next level. And, the space that I'm in, actually, we're about to acquire the spot like next door to it and sort of expand into that area too. So that'll kind of help. We're going to kind of turn it more into like a space that's beyond just the studio, but also like a creative space, and like a little like Studio B area where there's like extra space to do stuff and work. And so that'll be like the next kind of cool step to do for the next like year or so.
That's awesome.
At least.
Man.
And then
that's exciting.
My end goal though, I would love to have, like when I buy a house, to have like a separate structure like in the backyard that I can convert into a studio or something like that. I'd love to own my studio space. That's kind of the main thing that like I'm hesitant to put like a crazy amount of investment into a space like upfitting a space that I rent, All
right. So here's my 2 cents on that. Because here's the challenge of recording now is all the tools, the majority of the tools for professional recording are contained in like, at this point, in your cell phone.
Yeah.
You can get professional sounding recordings off of an iPad, off of a MacBook.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like this is all available to everybody, and it's becoming more and more prevalent among people to home record. Like it killed the ADR industry.
Yeah.
Like home recording just decimated. I have a bunch of friends that used to work in New York for Sound One, which is this huge, they did every major movie on the East Coast. they did all the sound for it, and now it's just gone. But if you were to create, like, and there's not a whole lot of people who would think this way, so I don't know if this even makes sense, but if you create a creative space, a sort of retreat area where it maybe is in this beautiful location where people have access to lodging and like they can live at the studio for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, whatever it takes to create this project, and you're working with them on that. Now you've taken on a full producer role as far as you're helping them, create this album or whatever the project is.
Yeah.
Like, to me, that sounds like something that could actually, if it's feasible for people to do, separate the whole being able to record it yourself from having an experience where you're completely forced into isolation to concentrate on getting this project done.
Right, yeah.
Which a lot of people would dream about being able to do. So if you could figure out a way to do that with that same collective mindset that you have, to make it where it's financially accessible and successful for you as well. Yeah, dude, that sounds like a friggin' dream. The fact that you're already doing that kind of thing now, where you're expanding your own studio to create creative spaces.
Yeah,
man.
I think it'd be cool. And that is part of it. I think some people like they want to have the experience of going to a studio and working with someone and having that whole, experience rather than just doing it at home. I know a lot of people who are musicians or songwriters that know their way around GarageBand or Logic pretty well and can make good sounding demos at home.
Mm-hmm.
And there's been a lot of times where like they'll kind of record all this stuff themselves at home, but they'll send it to me to mix it. Because it's like, they're like, yeah, I can get it to sound good, decent at home and good enough. But I want to hire you to like make it sound like it's a record or a finished recording, And so that sometimes is like a nice, or like a thing where it's, if someone can kind of do most of the legwork themselves at home or get all the parts how they want and have the time to like experiment with stuff on their own, then I can kind of come in at the end and help them finish the mix and kind of finish it off that way.
Yeah, there's a lot of different approaches to that. I imagine the amount of people that would say, hey, well, let's record basic tracks here and I'm going to do like my lead guitar stuff at home when I'm comfortable and in the mood, or vocals when my voice is just right.
For sure, exactly. And it's kind of like nowadays, like the drums are sort of the most important, like the room you're in and the gear is the most important for doing drums.
Mm-hmm.
Like keyboards you can do direct in, guitars you can kind of do almost anywhere. Vocals, it matters, to a degree what room you're in, but also like what mic you're using and stuff, So a lot of times people will, maybe they'll just come do drums for the day if they can do everything else themselves, or they'll come and do their vocals with me or something if they have the means of doing other things themselves.
Yeah, because you might have a compressor and a microphone combination that they just can't justify.
And I've definitely done sessions with other producers who are like, they have the means of doing everything themselves, but they're like, can we come track drums for 6 songs today?
Well, I mean, people go to Steve Albini because they want his signature sound.
Yeah.
I mean, he's technically a recording engineer, but they hear his work and go, I don't know how the hell he does that, but it sounds exactly like I'm standing in the room with those drums and I want that. And they'll go to him for that specific sound.
Yeah.
And it's very, that's cool. That's a cool thing to be able to get that.
And I try to make myself, there's a whole thing of like, do you do everything, like offer a ton of different services, or do you like niche down to like do one thing really, really well? And I think in Charleston and just meeting different people, I've tried to make myself available to accommodate things. Maybe eventually as I get older, I'll kind of find myself going into like one thing. But, I've done everything from recording bands live to producing singer-songwriters where we build all the songs from scratch, and to doing like I recorded in an audiobook last year for someone. Like,
that's awesome.
Different gigs kind of come across your table sometimes, and
that must have been tedious. I know what it's like recording a podcast.
Fortunately, I did not have to edit it. The editing would have been a nightmare for sure. I just had to record it. But it was really cool. The people I did it for were awesome. And I just had to track it and make
very specific,
the raw audio sound good, and then I sent it to the editor or the publisher, and they put it together how they wanted it to be. So
that's pretty cool.
Yeah,
that is really cool. All right, man. Well, anything else you got going on besides everything?
Well, Human Resources, we put out a new single today.
It came out today?
Yeah, called Cameron Avenue. Yeah.
Can I put it on this podcast?
Certainly,
I love having bands that own their own stuff.
Yeah.
Because then I'm like, can I share it on the pod? Because I can't put commercial music on here.
Yeah, I'll send it to you right now.
Oh, dude. Yes. That's awesome. All right, man. Well, it's coast-records.com.
That's it, yeah.
Is how to find Coast Records. And you're on social media at Coast Records?
Yep. Yeah.
Any other ways that people should contact you? Should they show up in Charleston and look for a half-flooded van? Maybe give you a push?
Yeah. If anyone wants to get in touch with me, my email is on my website, or hit me up on my Instagram is what I use probably the most.
Yeah.
I don't really do Twitter, and Facebook's out of necessity kind of, but Instagram's what I use the most for sure.
I was talking to one of my coworkers this morning about trying to just eliminate as much of that as possible from my life. There's certain aspects where they've seeped in. It's become a necessity.
Yeah.
But it's a depressant, man.
It is. It's a double-edged sword. I only get on Facebook to, sometimes I'll be on there scrolling aimlessly, and I have to snap myself out of this. What am I doing?
I just lost 20 minutes of my life.
And it just makes me mad. Everything on there is just garbage now. And
yeah.
But I have it just, it's a kind of a necessary promotional tool for getting the word out about stuff you're doing. And
yeah. And that's what it's become for a lot of us. Right. Yeah. And it's become a lot of people hey, this is what I'm doing, and then gone. You know what I'm saying? So the interaction starts to go away. And I wonder about that. And I'm like, okay, it's no longer social. It's just media.
It's just media. I mean, that's what I use it for. I don't air out all my personal life on my Facebook. Some people like to do that. That's not really my approach. I'm just kind of hey, new song came out today, or hey, this video we did came out, or it's just
or check out this new song from a band I recorded, or anything like that.
I just throw up posts like that, and my Instagram I'll sometimes get a little more personal on. That's kind of what I use more day to day. But
I do like the idea of Instagram, and I keep pushing people to go can we please resuscitate LO? It popped up, it died. I still post on it regularly because I really want it to just come back, because it's so much nicer to have all of the things we used to love about Instagram or when Facebook took over, ruined it.
Yeah.
But it's well, there's still LO. Can we come on, just kick some of the tumbleweeds out of the way? Can we get people on there?
It's so hard to get it. Everyone's they're so set now,
Oh yeah. And by the time you like Snapchat, I was thinking about, does that even exist anymore?
Some people use it somehow. I haven't used it in years. For me, once the Instagram story became a thing, Snapchat became useless to me.
Well, and the same thing with TikTok now. Because now, as soon as TikTok comes out and gets popular, then Instagram's oh, here's Reels. Nothing is safe.
All these, Facebook, I guess, is at the end of the day, anytime someone comes out with a new thing that's popular, they just figure out how to do it or buy them out and just do it themselves.
They just take it.
Swallow it up.
And it's well, why would I leave Instagram if I can have the same functionality here? And it's upsetting because, as just a pretty silly example, this week, or last week really, I was posting stuff and I'm getting a fraction of the interactions and things that you normally would get. And I'm what's going on? And I couldn't figure it out. And then I saw this today. I saw this because I just kind of I clicked on a hashtag looking for something. And it's this message when you click on a hashtag. It says recent posts from all hashtags are temporarily hidden to help prevent the spread of possible false information and harmful content related to the election.
Wow.
So this is what happens when you put all your eggs in one basket. They can just take the rug out from underneath you anytime they want.
That's kind of scary. That's sort of like censorship, or they're removing freedom of.
All hashtags are hidden. So you can put a post up with a hashtag and no one can find you until after this election is done. And it's stuff like that that's scares me. I'm
Some Big
dude,
Brother stuff.
Keep your own website, keep that up to date.
Yeah.
And keep doing what you got to do, because these things could be taken away from you. And there's so many people. I wonder how these people who used to do he would become like rich and famous off of one of these, TikTok, for example. And then tomorrow TikTok might no longer exist.
Yeah.
Because, Trump decides he wants to ban it again or whatever.
Right.
Like people put their livelihoods in this property that's not theirs. Kind of like you said earlier about you want your own thing, your own studio space that you own, because you don't know next year when your lease is up, your landlord could say, "Hey, I sold this property. You got to get out of here."
That's what happened to my old studio. I got kind of the place I was in a warehouse, and the warehouse got more or less bought out by a company and got converted into another use, and I had to move out.
I think the message is pretty clear. If you're going to take anything away from this episode, is do it yourself and ownership are important concepts in all aspects of your life.
Yeah. If
you want to have control and have true security.
For sure.
Cool, man. All right. Thanks for coming in.
Dude, thanks so much for having me.
All right, man.
You could turn me loose. I'm thinking midsummer. I'm thinking midsummer. You could be my side. Maybe we could play through. We should give it a try. Sun will be up soon. I can feel your sunflower. And you turn me loose. I'm thinking midsummer. Yeah, I'm thinking midsummer. Sunflowers. Sunflowers.
Get going, don't forget to subscribe to the podcast and share it with your friends. Also, check out more about the podcast at our website. It's jwnpod.com. And you can follow me on Instagram. It's at Joe Latex, JOEL, the number 8X. Thanks. Have a great one. Peace.